And let me once again welcome everybody officially to today's online event, States Under Pressure, Responsibly Managing Stimulus Spending. Today's event is sponsored by the Ash Institute's Government Innovators Network and the Pew Center on the States. I'd like to turn things over now to today's moderator, Mayor Steve Goldsmith, who is the Director of the Innovations in American Government program here at the Harvard Kennedy School and former two-term mayor of Indianapolis. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome everybody. And our pleasure to help co-sponsor this with Pew on this important subject. Jim, I'm not entirely sure I'm the right moderator because as a local official, my goal is to figure out how to do good things without being too much bureaucratized by the state government, right? So the goal was to do something innovative without somebody at the state government telling me no. So I've got a perspective on the call that is odd, I guess. And so I think what we're dealing with today is a very interesting concept, which is the Vice President and the President have this huge stimulus package, $787 billion, and huge increases in lots of categories, weatherization and others, for example. And they've made a substantial demand, appropriately, that state and city governments to be accountable for the dollars. So the purpose of today's call is to look at some of the best of those accountability systems, and I'm just kind of injecting from my local role, how can we have accountability that includes performance as well as financial tracking and not be too preoccupied with the fact that careful accounting dollars is the same as performance, but is a component of performance. So with that, I'd like to let me welcome the presenters and then ask them to kind of present in turn. We'll have Neal Johnson start in just a second, and he's the director of Pew's Government Performance Project, and he'll introduce some of these challenges. And we have a great presentation from Ohio, one of the premier states, in figuring out how to use procurement, IT, and legislative affairs all together to provide a kind of smooth platform. Greg Rothwell, former Chief Procurement Officer for DHS, which means I suspect, Greg, second only to the Department of Defense, you were spending lots of money and always well, I'm sure. And then Fred Thompson, Senior Advisor to Pew Center on the States, followed by questions and answers. We're going to ask after Neal for the presenters, starting with Ohio, to go in order and make short presentations, 10 to 15 minutes, after which we'll take questions. So thank you much, everybody. And Neal.
Thanks so much, Mayor Goldsmith. It's truly an honor and a privilege to share a few moments with all of you in this interactive session. I'd say good morning, afternoon, and evening to our far-flung participants from Bangladesh to Portugal and 45 states from Alaska to Florida. We're, on behalf of the Pew Center on the States, we're encouraged to have so many of you represented here today. Our efforts at the center include working with states to improve service to the public by strengthening government policy and performance. And, you know, this present situation provides a really unique opportunity for us to serve as a resource and listening post to help facilitate the exchange of best practices among the states. And we're just delighted to be able to do this in partnership with our colleagues, Mayor Goldsmith and others at the Kennedy School. Our announcement of this event has already spurred a number of interesting conversations with those of you who are trying to make government work better in the midst of this unique historical moment. Your participation reflects both the seriousness of the nation's economic situation and the really incredible responsibility for those of you to manage your stimulus spending in a manner that both spurs immediate national economic recovery and strengthens your state's long-term economic and fiscal foundation. So with this historic influx of money from the stimulus package lies the opportunity for every state to spend responsibly and really to invest for the success of the greater good here. None of us can afford to squander the opportunity. The responsibility, as the mayor said, for spending and overseeing these hundreds of billions, most of it within the next 3 years, combined with the chain of events that brought us here, are also fueling increased scrutiny of government. As a result, states will be subject to significantly higher levels of spending transparency, and everybody here is really trying to figure out what that means right now. the pressure's on more than ever before for states to use performance measures to figure out what works and what doesn't, and to drive new stimulus spending within the larger context of the state's overall fiscal goals. You have to keep your eye on the big picture as well as on the immediate tasks at hand. The challenge for states to spend responsibly is even more daunting, since the goal of the Act, as we say, is to get money into the economy quickly. And as all of you well know, state governments are not structured to spend funds quickly. I think Mayor Goldsmith would agree there. So policymakers may be tempted in some cases to raise spending thresholds, change contracting rules to speed up the spend. While the desire to take such steps like that may be understandable, it's leaders like you who have to balance the need to create jobs quickly with the responsibility to invest in proven strategies. In just a few moments here, our very distinguished and knowledgeable panel will offer solutions and advice for balancing those interests. During the past 10 years, through our Government Performance Project, Pew has emphasized the need for states to focus on strategic planning and performance management. In March, I'll make brief reference, we released a report entitled Trade-Off Time, How Four States Continue to Deliver, which showed how tough economic times like these can forge better decision-making and a heightened vigilance to ensure that every single tax dollar delivers maximum value for the public. This stimulus infusion and the reporting requirements provide the opportunity to link this spending to statewide goals in the current crisis by applying the principles that we've outlined. Quickly, first, assessing a state's unique characteristics to build a long-term strategic framework based on policy challenges and the stimulus dollars available. Second, refocusing state agency missions and measures in light of the current crisis and strategic opportunities. And finally, using that information to guide priorities for strategic investments and for reductions, and to engage the public around them. Fortunately, with the knowledge and experience represented by this panel, as well as those of you who will contribute from the audience, I'm confident that we can collectively advise states on how to develop effective stimulus strategies to spend responsibly and invest for success. Thanks again to all of you for joining us here today. Now, I'll turn the program over to Tyler Terry, the Chief Procurement Officer from the state of Ohio, who's going to share more about their stimulus management planning along with his colleagues from the state of Ohio, who, with the leadership of Governor Strickland, have really been forging some important paths in this challenging and difficult time. Tyler?
Hello, this is Terry Tyler. I'm Chief Procurement Officer of the state of Ohio, and we appreciate the opportunity to present the process that we used and some of the details of how we structured that. I will say up front, though, that we're not in a position to have the calibration saying that this is the best among the states. It was just that we had to put something together very quickly, and in anticipation of the stimulus package, and it appears that it has worked fairly well to this point. So we'll reserve judgment on whether it's the best. The approach we want to take today is that I'll more or less set the stage of how we began the journey, and then we'll have Steve Hunter, who is our state procurement administrator, review the procurement guidance that we provided to our agencies. And I might add that Ohio is very, very decentralized, with the agencies managing the majority of their spends, especially the lower dollar spends. And then we have Joe Secrest, who is president of the Ohio Controlling Board and also the Office of Budget and Management Coordinator of the federal stimulus implementation. So we're going to cover it from the beginning through the guidance, through how we're reporting and managing it. So we clearly had the challenge of the what, when, where, and who when we started this effort. The main thing is we started early. We had no idea, if you'll switch to the next slide, we had no idea how the Fed would distribute, the money. And we knew that there'd be federal components, state components, local government components, as well as community and nonprofit organizations competing for the money. We also knew that the interest would be tremendous. In actuality, we received over 25,000 projects thus far, and so it's quite a number to keep organized. We also knew there'd be a pile of money, a fair amount of spend coming to Ohio, and we also knew that there'd be 120 funding streams and 180 programs, and I only say that to indicate how complex this effort has been for the state of Ohio as well as all the other states. We also knew it'd be dispersed through some formula, competitiveness, and discretionary grants. And then, based on all the uncertainty but the magnitude of what we had in front of us, we knew that we needed an enterprise system to start collecting the information and hanging on to it, the various components of the legislation. We would anticipate the House version, then we would gear up and see the changes maybe in the Senate version. So it was a constant change, but the basic model would be using the infrastructure set up on the enterprise system. We also recognized that the reporting, the transparency, and the accountability would be extreme. And here Ohio was very fortunate, I say that in jest, in that we were going to be one of 16 states audited by the GAO. And I know that the three of us have responded to quite a number of questions that the federal government has identified to understand how selection criteria was made, how we're keeping score, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been audited or will be audited by the GAO. The Ohio Inspector General will be very involved to make sure we're in total compliance, the auditor of the state as well, and then also the Federal Accountability Board. So we knew transparency and reporting and accountability would be absolutely extreme, so we want to be prepared for that. So that's how we began, and with that we worked on procurement guidance to our agencies, and as I said earlier, we're very decentralized, and I'll turn it over to Steve Hunter to give an overview of the purchasing guidance that we provided.
Thank you, Terry, and welcome to our audience. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you and talk a little bit about what we're trying to do in Ohio. I've been involved with a number of other states on the ARRA funds through NASPO, which is the National Association of State Procurement Officials, and we've kind of shared some stories. And I know that each of those states are developing guidance that reflect the laws of their state and cover the various agencies that they are responsible to make procurements for. As Terry mentioned earlier, Ohio is somewhat decentralized. The major part of our spend, the agencies do under their direct authority. And I know that the ARRA funds also get into other areas like construction. We, by law, do not have the authority to bid construction, so my talk is going to be primarily toward supplies and services and give some guidance to the agencies. Part of our concern was a fear that the agencies may go out and think that they have these funds available, they can just go off and use their own authority and do their own thing, so to speak. And so we wanted to get this guidance out to them that there are certain aspects of the Act that require them to follow procurement guidelines that are already in place and apply certain things that our processes already do. And I'm going to try to cover those quickly. What you see here is kind of a flow chart of our current procurement processes. You'll see on here, I'm not going to take the time to go through this in detail because we definitely could spend probably the rest of our hour and into the afternoon discussing this. But just to highlight a few things, the agencies have authority up to $50,000 per purchase, and they can use their direct authority. They do have to consider some state resources, which you'll see listed there, before they can do that. If the purchase is above the $50,000, then it does have to come to our department for consideration of bidding it out through competitive selection. And our competitive selection program consists of three basic types of procurements. We can issue just a standard invitation to bid when we have a known need and price is going to be the driving factor. We can do a bid by reverse auction, which is where we will issue what we call a reverse auction qualification summary, which is basically the bid document excluding the pricing pages. We use this to determine who we're going to invite to participate, lays the groundwork for who's meeting the specs and can perform the service if they are awarded the contract. We will then hold the online auction event, and they can adjust their prices downward, and we eventually then end up with an awardee. Or we can use the request for proposal process for items where we don't really have a known solution and we want our suppliers to give us the best solution. And then we compare a lot of factors, including price, in making that determination. You'll see also we have some what we call our negotiated term contracts. These are set in place in a very similar fashion of the federal GSA program. In fact, many of those contracts, we use the federal GSA pricing. If we determine that it's not possible for us to bid these documents out or establish these contracts through our processes, we will grant them what's called a release and permit. And that enables them to use their direct authority again to enter into the contract. And if the contract again is going to be over $50,000, then they do have to go before our state controlling board and get approval from them. So these are the various checkpoints that we have in place. Also, under an agency's direct authority, our department has issued guidance to them on how they should be conducting their procurement activities and how they should establish their internal processes to make sure we have openness, fairness, and competition, as well as accountability and transparency. Now, in general, those processes will take anywhere from 45 days on a invitation to bid for a spot purchase up to 120 days and maybe even higher than that if you're talking about a request for proposal or a major term contract. And we understand the urgency of investing a lot of these stimulus dollars are not going to permit that kind of time period. And it was previously mentioned, I think all the states are facing that. So what we're proposing to do is to look wherever we can in our process to trim down time and things that we do normally and still accomplish those goals, but do it in less time. And whittle down those processing times to, as you see there, anywhere from 17 days to 60 days. And
Steve, this
I'm
is
sorry?
Steve Goldsmith. Steve, this is Steve Goldsmith. I'm here, so I want to interrupt your flow, but let me just pause it a couple, and then you can respond, or Joe can. And you know, in the end, I think we can probably provide a resource link so that people who want to copy what you've done can either send you a question or look at it. But the first question is just very generally, when you guys use the term infrastructure that's set up in your enterprise system, can you just list what are the smart practices that you're including when you say you've got the infrastructure set up in your enterprise system? Is it the stuff that's on this slide, or does it include other things?
No, it would be the IT infrastructure to serve as the central repository for all the our information, the general ledger, financial accounts of money coming in, money going out, and then the 1512 data elements that are required to be reported that is what we're talking about when we talk about the infrastructure.
Got it. And you took your existing infrastructure and tailored it to handle the additional accountability issues with the stimulus money?
Yeah, I mean, I think in Ohio we are fortunate, and I think Terry touched on this when he was talking, that we have an ERP system that was sophisticated enough and had enough bandwidth for us to be able to stand up this system on top of it that will enable us to, again, centralize the process, compile the information, report it back to our transparency front page, which is the recoveryohio.gov, and we will in turn, on a quarterly basis, report that same information to recovery.gov at the federal level. And so it will be a centralized process where the reports will all be condensed, and then the transparency part of it is when we report that back out to Ohio's web page for transparency and the federal government's web page.
And if somebody wants to, we have more questions than I want to ask you guys because we eat up all our time. If somebody wants to look at what are the components in your current automated purchasing system, what are the existing protocols, and how you figured those. When we're done, is there a place where people can go look at that or email you, or maybe Jim's got that already figured out?
For this, the DAS.
Yeah. Are you talking about the DAS walkthrough stuff that in terms of the purchasing process itself?
Yeah, because I want to look at what your standard protocols or templates are, and kind of what you tailored to kind of fit what's going on here. And maybe that we've got a separate question with the kind of what involvement did you have with the law department, the Attorney General law department, in kind of trying to rewrite your procurement system to comply with the new federal laws?
Yes, we can provide that to you.
Okay.
There is a DAS website that I think if you go to that will have all that information on it.
All right, Jim, when we're done with that presentation, why don't you pull that up for us? All right, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay, quickly and jumping back to the slide that's up there now. Our goal is to, again, reduce the time. What you see here is going to be contingent upon us receiving pretty much a finished statement of work, because we all know that's where a lot of time gets invested, but if we can get that, then we can look at our processes and trim those times down, still be in compliance with our laws, still give the bidders a very good opportunity to review the needs and get their bid responses prepared and back into us. All of our bidding document bids are open publicly. On an invitation to bid, we do share the entire bidding document, including pricing. On reverse auctions and RFPs, they're publicly given the names of the companies who are going to be providing prices and participating in the event until we award the contract. And then after we award the contract, then all documents are made public. So that brings in, again, the transparency required by the Act and the open competition. We do maintain a vendor file, which we will send notice of any purchase to those who are registered with us for the particular product or service. We also post all of our bidding documents on the Internet and available throughout the entire U.S. and overseas if anybody is tied into us over there. So again, complying with the Act requirement for openness and open competition. Okay, now we also, the Act requires the application of the domestic preference, or Buy America. Ohio is one of the fewer states that has an in-state and domestic preference law that requires us to apply this on every purchase that we make through competitive selection. I'm just real quickly going to talk about this. Under the Buy America side, we do consider the domestic versus foreign product. We are not signatories to the treaties, but our law does provide that we make provisions for products produced in North America. So we do honor Canada and Mexico, as do the federal agencies under their Buy America Act. We will give preference to U.S. produced products. We also follow the 50% rule, which means that 50% or more of the cost of the product involves U.S. parts, labor, and so on. Once we determine which bids are offering foreign product, we will set those off. We will then look at the remaining bid documents, and we'll begin our application of the in-state preference, which we did look through the Act, and we could find no language that prohibited an in-state preference. So again, our law would kick in, and we'd have to apply that. Certainly, if there's language there that we missed, or if we come back and say we can't do that, then we would honor the federal program and step beyond the in-state preference. But as you can see there, we have several checks that we have to make for a company to be declared as an Ohio bidder, meaning that the item has to be produced in Ohio, or they have presence in Ohio, meaning that at least 10 employees or 75% of their workforce is based in Ohio. We also treat our bordering or contiguous states in the same manner. States of Kentucky, Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania, and New York. Unfortunately, West Virginia does apply a preference toward Ohio, so we cannot consider them to be a border state. Now, when we look at on the Buy Ohio side, states that meet the requirements you see there, they will be given a 5% preference over a non-Ohio bidder. So if we have somebody from California it doesn't have presence or is not offering an Ohio product, and they bid $1, we would add 5% to that, and if the Ohio or border state would fall within that 5% range, they would be awarded the contract. We would then go back and look at the foreign product and to, again, comply with the Act so as not to pay an excessive price. If we would find that the foreign product that meets the spec is greater than 6% less expensive than the lowest domestic, then we could award to the foreign product, and that conforms to the Federal Buy America Act. Okay, so the next part of the Act does require that we give consideration to small disadvantaged businesses. And Ohio does have 3 programs, which 2 of them are set forth by law. The third one is a executive order goal program. The first program is the Community Rehabilitation Program, which most of you may know this as a state use program. That is a law requirement in Ohio that they be given first consideration. If they offer the product or they offer the service, then we must attempt to negotiate a contract with them first. We also have a minority set-aside law that requires us to set aside 15% of our purchases for participation by certified minority companies only. And we do have the Encouraging Diversity, Growth, and Equity, which we call EDGE program. This is for social and economically disadvantaged businesses. And there is a 5% goal that we conduct our business activities with those companies. And I do know in construction, those type of areas where you have a lot of subcontractors involved, they have processes set in place that would require the prime contractor to identify their subs and to certify that they will do at least 5% of their business activity with the EDGE companies. Okay, the next slide, just some other things that we are doing. Which we talked about some of the guidance documents that Ohio has put together. We have shared this with our NASPO partners. All of those are available at the NASPO website. We have issued 8 guidance documents to our agencies, which Joe will cover in his presentation. We talked about some of the terms and conditions that may be different from what Ohio's terms and conditions are. For example, in the construction areas, the use of domestic steel. Back in our areas, the use of fixed-price contracts. And I didn't mention, but a lot of our term contracts under competitive selection are fixed-price contracts, some of which do contain escalators for price adjustments. We talked about the civil rights laws. A lot of those go beyond where Ohio requires, so we will be identifying those for the agencies. We get into brand-specific areas, which I recall the Act does not support tying your specs so tightly that you're looking at just one company being able to play the game. And Ohio does have a rule that's in place prohibits that.
This is Steve Goldsmith again. Sorry to interrupt. We're getting a long line of questions here, and I don't want to interrupt you until we've heard from Joe. So let me know how you want to do that transition, because we've got some people very interested in what you guys are talking about.
And I'm just getting ready to transition to Joe.
All right, thanks.
So with that, that takes care of supplies and services. So Joe is going to talk about what OBM is going to do.
Thank you very much. My name is Joe Secrest, and we are delighted to have the opportunity to talk to a broader audience about the way we are attempting to implement ARA here in Ohio. And as with many of the states, I'm sure, who might be listening, Ohio is undergoing some pretty difficult economic times, and so we are most appreciative of the opportunities that the ARA federal stimulus process offers to us, and are very excited about trying to put in place some protective programs around that resource. One of the things I think Ohio is, and I think I mentioned this briefly in a remark earlier, one of the things that Ohio is fortunate in, and I'm not sure that this applies to all states, but maybe to many, we had the necessary IT infrastructure in place to allow us to build a centralized data collection system on. So very early on, I think the decision was made here in Ohio that we were going to, OBM was going to serve as the lead agency, build a system of money monitoring in terms of money in and money out, in terms of how Ohio received the money and what amounts, and then the programs that we allotted that money to, and then have a system that we could manage the expenditures of those funds as they came through the process, allowing us again to centralize that activity. We built on the general ledger collection system with the collection of all the 1512 data, and we formatted that and put it into an electronic system that allows the agencies to put the information into a template that talks about number of jobs created, number of jobs retained, the project, where it's at, how much money went to it, and it will have an opportunity for them to provide progress reports on the projects as they are sequenced and built as the money flows to them. So one of the things we did with the centralized reporting system was to put that in place. The other thing that will be part also of our centralized reporting system is a risk management process that also will be part of that central repository, and it requires each of our state agencies, with the assistance of our internal auditing program, to map out a process map identifying their risk and where those risk areas are, and then to establish internal control systems that will minimize the risk. So that will be mapped out, and also will be part of the data collection system in the central repository. So when somebody goes into that system, they will be able to see the money that comes in for the project. They will be able to track the data elements on the project. They will be able to see the process mapping for the risk assessment, and it will do a complete wraparound in terms of all of that information being available, which ought to make the ease of auditing and the ease of following the money in terms of its entry into Ohio to the completion of the project, and then the reporting back out of that system. Ohio has a web page of its own housed in the governor's office called recoveryohio.gov, and we will report that information for transparency and accountability purposes from the central repository out to that governor-sponsored web page, and we will also report that on a quarterly basis to the federal government, thereby complying with our requirements to do that.
Hey, Joe.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Steve Goldsmith again. Sorry to interrupt you. I want to get to Greg and Fred, but let me just ask you a couple technical questions before we kind of lose the flow of it from some of the questions that are in the line here, because we're going to go to questions and answers here in about 5 minutes. But before we kind of finish up, this question is clearly not from me. How are you collecting the data for Section 1512 and we don't know the field layout?
Well, what we have done at this point is take the Federal Registry information. The Federal Registry put out a kind of a template, and it went through an exhaustive process and had all the fields laid out that was going to be required in the 1512. So we loaded that into our system. Because of the sophistication of our system, we have the ability to go in there and modify that if the final outcome from the federal government changes somewhat from what the Federal Registry looked like it was going to require. So we just took the template from the Federal Registry, put it into our infrastructure with the ability to modify that if the need arises.
And just a couple quick follow-on questions for any of you from Ohio. Angie has an interesting question here. How much of this data is transparent in the sense that it's available to any citizen, and how much is proprietary and controlled by you guys?
It is all we will provide. Go back again to the surveillance and the oversight that Ohio is going to have. Again, we're going to be looked at by GAO. We are one of the 16 fortunate ones. We also have a very active and engaged auditor of state who is requiring from us daily feeds information, and we will be reporting it on probably a weekly basis to the governor's transparency page, and it is all public record. So none of it.
If I'm a disgruntled Columbus citizen, I can get in to see what you're doing with the recovery dollars?
You can't. You will be able to see that through the governor's page. You will be able to see that through the collective page he has. But all of this is public information, and anybody who would make a public records request would have the ability to. The only thing they wouldn't have the ability to view it. For example, if we have an agency who is putting together a risk management process map, and that is not a final product, if it's in a draft stage, then they would not have access to that. But once that process map is finalized and it becomes a permanent part of the record within the repository, anybody could ask for and gain access to that information.
Okay.
But it will be obviously open to all of those auditing entities that are out there: GAO, our state inspector general, the auditor of state, or anybody else that has a need to get in there for auditing purpose. I mean, we go clear from the assurance statements to the governor's certification, to the money coming in, to the money going out, to the 1512 elements, and to the final disposition of the project. That will all be available within that system.
Okay, let me do a couple other quick things here, because I know we got two more speakers, and I keep asking questions, but they're not all my questions. There are others. Jim Cooney, when we're done, would you tell everybody how they can get access to these PowerPoints when the conference is over? Because many people want copies of them. So if you put that on your list of to-dos, I want to come back when you guys are done, and maybe after the last two presentations, and talk about differences between state and federal law on disadvantaged businesses, minority business. The definitions vary from state to fed. But let me just ask you to finish, and we'll go to the last two speakers, and I'll come back to the remaining 10 questions we got in the queue for you guys.
Okay. So is our component of it done?
No, that would be a little rude of me. How about if I said, can you finish your component in 120 seconds?
I can do that easily.
Thank you.
The other thing we have done as the lead agency here in Ohio, OBM, is we have issued, and Steve mentioned that briefly, 8 guidances out to our executive agencies, and we have kind of helped them in terms of implementing each agency was required to form an audit team with executive manager and an owner and a legal team and a procurement person on that team, and then we sent them out a risk management guidance. We sent them out an ARA Hub reporting guidance document, and then we sent them out through, in conjunction with DAS, recipient and sub-recipient reporting requirements and the mechanism for doing that. So we're hoping that that system then has built the necessary framework for us to be able to comply with the reporting requirements of ARA.
All right, you guys have got a lot more to talk about, but I appreciate your kind of abbreviating it a little bit for us. And now we're going to have Greg Rothwell tell you from the federal. He's going to explain how easy it is at the federal level and how you should learn lessons from what he did. Greg.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think I was invited on this teleconference to basically talk a little bit about what's going on at the federal level, but also because of the two projects that I was very intimately involved with, which involved a lot of major spending in a short amount of time. The first was the stand-up of the Department of Homeland Security. I was the first chief procurement officer there. We were given billions of dollars to obligate and almost no staffing whatsoever. So we basically had lots of dollars, no people, and a very critical mission in terms of trying to acquire a lot of things to respond to what was a perceived terrorist threat. The second initiative, the second thing I was involved in, which involved a lot of dollars being spent in a short amount of time, was Hurricane Katrina. We basically had a situation where FEMA obligated approximately $1.5 billion a year, and then in the first 3 weeks of after Hurricane FEMA obligated $3 billion. So again, a lot of dollars going through a very, very small FEMA workforce. I think at the time, FEMA used to obligate about the $1.5 billion a year with 25 people. They then obligated $3 billion with those same 25, and I think their current staffing has grown to close to 200. So I was involved with the department with both of those, and I guess I just have some lessons learned. As I look at this current challenge, this economic stimulus, it seems to be slightly different in that it is much more measured and much more disciplined, and that is a very good thing. There are some contradictions, however. I mean, there's the initiative to try to achieve the objectives of economic stimulus, which is to get the money into the economy very, very quickly, but to also spend it wisely. So, I mean, that is a clear challenge that we have, and I believe the state of Ohio has certainly risen to. Some of the things that the federal government is very concerned with are very similar to what the state is concerned with, and that is because there is going to be so much oversight that the process has to be almost pristine. There has to be competition. The recipients of the dollars have to span the broad socioeconomic portfolio. I know in the federal government, if all the dollars were just to go to large businesses, that would be in and of itself viewed as a failure. The dollars have to be spread among the small businesses, the minority firms, the women-owned firms, the service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, the hub zone firms. All the different categories need to make sure that they're participating in this because of the dollars and the public interest. There needs to be a lot of transparency, a lot of openness, something that the federal government has not always done extremely well, but there needs to be just a lot of visibility in terms of what's going on. We need to manage very, very carefully the mixed messaging, which is spend, 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 and at the same time save, save, save. So, and that's a real thing back here in the federal government or in the federal government. Get the dollars out, but at the same time, don't hold this conference, don't take that trip, don't do this, don't do that, because we're trying to save money. So it's an interesting environment. When I was involved in Hurricane Katrina, one of the things that really served me extremely well was to involve our internal inspector general day one of the process, basically making sure that the inspector general was there to observe the decision-making while it was actually occurring, and it really made life a lot easier when all the hearings took place later on, because the IG could really understand exactly why decisions were made real time and not just come in afterwards and be critical. There's going to be a real need in this particular, with the economic stimulus, to make sure the requirements are as solid as possible. That was not always the case in the Hurricane Katrina or in the stand-up of DHS. I mean, all we knew is we wanted some sort of technology to stop shoulder-launched missiles and a lot of dollars would go at that without necessarily the best requirements in place, as an example. So we have more time now because of the discipline to actually have better requirements. There's going to be a lot of accountability along with performance, a lot of record keeping on this, and it sounds like people are aware of that. And then finally, the other thing I heard from the state of Ohio, which I really agree with, is this measuring results. And typically in the federal government, results were classically measured as just dollars obligated. But that's not going to be the right measure. I mean, we're going to have to measure jobs created, programs that were actually completed, and what the ultimate benefit was to the citizen. Anyway, I think, obviously this is not a great place for our country to be in, but I do think it's an opportunity to make government work better and to improve service to the citizens. So we should really just take advantage of it. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Fred.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate that. I wanted to take an opportunity to summarize a little bit of what's been said and the different perspectives that people have heard today. First of all, from the economics perspective, there's the Chinese curse that says, may you live in interesting times. And there's some positives and there's certainly some negatives. From the positive perspective, the stimulus money is coming at a good time. This is a challenging time for the economies, and this offers states the opportunity to save some jobs in their state by spending money there, and it also offers them the opportunity to save some state jobs through the stabilization funding. Good value there. Also from the positive perspective, it's a good time to be a buyer. I think a lot of organizations, agencies, contractors are struggling. So it's an opportunity for better prices and better quality in what's bought. The next point I think both Greg and Neal talked about, those states that are operating already with discipline, effective performance metrics, effective performance measurement, have a real opportunity here to make this money go further than it would have gone otherwise, and also to make where they have to make budget cuts, to make those intelligently and carefully. So I think that it's an opportunity for the well-managed states to do an even better job in this time of crisis. On the negative side and on the challenging side, Greg just made the point, which I think is an excellent one, that you may not have the people, the time, or the dollars to ramp up in a way you'd like to take on this job. In fact, as he mentioned with FEMA and Katrina, double the work in 1 year, and I think probably some states are looking at a similar challenge here. They are trying to do this work at a time when they're losing revenue and jobs in their state and the funding that they need to run the activities of their state. I think it's a time where extra care needs to be taken with the vendors to ensure that those that are hired to do work for the state are effectively able to do that and have the lines of credit and have the financial capability to carry through on the contracts that they're taking on. It's also important to recognize, and I think several speakers made this point, that this isn't permanent money, that these dollars need to be spent with keeping in mind that this is a temporary surge, a temporary opportunity, and long-term investments have to be made very carefully in this kind of environment. I think states are being encouraged to spend quickly, which raises the risk here. So those are some of my thoughts on the economic issue. I guess I'd next want to turn to infrastructure. I used a couple of slides here to show what I would call infrastructure projects gone bad. Here's a bridge in Peru, which is built to the other side of the river, but it unfortunately doesn't connect the two roads. And here's a police station in Turkey, which is built like a rock, but unfortunately it is actually built in a rock. So I'm not sure it would make comfortable accommodation. I think it raises. I use those just to add a little humor, and also to point out that I think that when we make the decisions about what we're buying, we need to look at how to take care of long-term investments and how to look at in the long term what we need to do to not to try to take so many shortcuts that we don't follow our process. I think that Steve did a great job in talking about the supplies and the services and the approach that Ohio is taking. It's not the elimination of those good processes that result in good results. In fact, it's a discipline to follow those, but to attempt to follow those in an expedited way, and to keep systems and controls in the process, not to abandon those, but to try to manage them effectively towards the need. Greg talked about the need to have a pristine process, and I think that is also appropriate here, is to understand that we're not eliminating steps and we're not shortcutting processes that have worked in the past. We're trying to make those effectively managed. It's an opportunity to catch up on deferred maintenance, which has been a concern in many reviews that Pew has done on the states, and I think that this is an opportunity for states to look at the long-term opportunities to lower their maintenance costs. Finally, let me talk to visibility. A number of the speakers have made comments about what is being done on this score. From a national level, there's the recovery.gov website. There will certainly be increased scrutiny at the national level, I think by the press, certainly by citizens and active citizens in every state. The public needs to understand this opportunity, but they also need to understand the temporary nature of the spending, and I think it's important not to overpromise. Ohio made the point, Terry, I think, about 25,000 projects and 120 funding streams and 180 programs. It's extremely complex to measure and manage and present a clear picture to the public, but that is part of our challenge here. The issue and the challenge of Ohio being one of the 16 audited is a challenge for them, but in a way it's almost as big a challenge or a greater challenge for the other 34 states that might not be audited on a bi-monthly basis by GAO, because they have to put the same discipline in place without perhaps someone looking quite as closely over their shoulder as they do it. It was also impressive, I think, that both Steve and Terry and others from Ohio talked about the IT reporting capability, the ability to have a statewide look, a statewide management, enterprise management process to look at how money is being spent, to be able to manage and measure this on a statewide basis. And in this case, once again, they were able to adapt what they have rather than try to create something new in a challenging and difficult environment. Sharing knowledges and approaches, I think, is a critical part of all of this effort, and certainly part of what this dialogue is about. And the discussion of the NASPO website that Steve gave and identified the stimulus page there, a place where people can go to share ideas and learn what's working in one state and what's in another. The challenge of spend, 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 save, 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 as Greg pointed out, is a conundrum, but it is one that states are in and that they will have to deal with. And then finally, I thought I'd close on the comment about risk and risk management that Jim made from Ohio, the need for internal controls to be part of the overall picture, and the ability to create and to make available to the public a central repository that talks frankly about what the risks are and that shares how those risks are being addressed on the recoveryohio.gov webpage. Managing the recovery as an enterprise, being able to consolidate this information, share it with the federal overseers, but also to share it with the public is a clear part of making progress here.
All right. Are you just taking a breath, Fred, or are you done?
I'm done. I'm done.
Set up, we're going to hire him in Ohio.
Yeah. Fred, I got a number of questions for Ohio, but let me just start. Well, if you're going to refer people on the phone to states in addition to Ohio, Terry was disclaimed that he was the best, but many of us, Ohio's ahead of most everybody else. But what other states would you direct people to, anybody on the call, where you think they have a nice model for other people to look at?
Pew's identified Virginia as one of the states that is also a leader in this area. Utah is another state that one might look to for kind of sort of best-in-class approach to how to attack these challenges.
And I would suggest Michigan and Indiana as well.
I tell you, I think Terry, not Terry, Steve, made a good suggestion. Many of these national associations are posting on their website, NASPO for one and NASBO for another, model information on states that are moving forward and implementing ARA, and they are great resources in terms of picking up ideas and looking at how other states are doing it.
Okay. Danette asked the question I kind of started with. We can ask Ohio, but anybody on the call may have suggestions. So, how are states managing the expectations of local governments? Do they purchase off your site? Do they have reporting requirements, either from Ohio or Fred? Any observations about those practices?
For Ohio, we do have a very active cooperative purchasing program. We make our contracts available to our members, which are a little over 1,800 right now. There is a requirement that they report back to us. We continue to work that issue daily with them. But we have connections with the suppliers, and we require the suppliers to give us periodic reports on their sales activity with our co-op members.
On the reporting side, if it is money that touches the state's general ledger, and by that I mean if the state gets the money and we pass it down to the locals, then we are monitoring and managing that resource. But there are times when the locals are getting the money directly from the federal government, and we don't have the capability to track that money.
You all, I'm sorry, somebody else.
I think, yeah, I just wanted to add, I think it's a very mixed picture in terms of the contracting structure among the states, and in many cases the states are an intermediary, but in other cases the money is going independently. And I think that the GAO report, the first one that was done, did talk to this issue and did suggest that states should do their best to monitor money that even may not be going through their financial system. That does create an extra level of complexity. But I think that there are opportunities both with the states to allow local governments to use their contracts, and that's something that we've been working with states on, as well as the opportunity for states to work in concert with local governments so that they're reporting consistently and completely on the ARRA for the purposes of national tracking.
This is again Ohio, Joe. I know our auditor of state has the statutory authority to require that information from local governments, and she is doing that. The executive branch, in terms of our internal executive branch system that we have set up, we do not have the authority to require the locals to report to us, but she does, and I think she is gathering that information from the local governments.
Two more related questions. Any of you can comment for us? A couple questions here about federal definitions of disadvantaged business enterprises and state definitions of minority and women business enterprises, and sometimes the definitions are different or not. How are you handling that inside your procurement system?
Well, this is Greg. From the federal perspective, it's very detailed and prescribed by the Small Business Administration, and a lot of times it has to do with the different types of commodity codes or service codes. So there really is not much question about it. I mean, so for example, a small business typically has to have some average dollar amount of revenue over a 3-year period. If it's a service, if it's a commodity, it's a different thing. So while it seems a little complicated, it's very easy to find out what the answer is. There's also a requirement that the companies self-certify as to what they are, and then with the penalty, if they falsify that. So it's really not too complicated. It's detailed. There's a lot of information on it, but it's very, very easy to find.
In Ohio, our Equal Opportunity Division oversees that certification process for both the EDGE program and the minority program. It's very similar to what was just described. On the minority side, they have to provide quite detailed information on ownership of their organization and their tax information, things like that. There's also penalty under law that if they do provide false information, they can't be prosecuted. And they do post their certified MBEs and EDGE companies on their website.
Let's spend a little bit of time on the vendor issues here. Anybody on the conversation and anybody in the chat session can, I think Jim can make comments as well. So how are you handling the due diligence on the vendors? the vendor's financial capacity, speed and risk sometimes go together. How are you overcoming those things? What's the process for monitoring contracts? We spent a lot of time on the details of the procurement process. Anybody on the call have some comments about what's best and where we should go to think about vendor and contract monitoring issues?
Well, again, this is Greg. What we did on the Hurricane Katrina issue is we called in all of our larger contractors and basically met with them and basically did a little bit of an orientation session on their responsibilities, our responsibilities, and what they should do in the event of some sort of a discovered fraudulent or ethical breach. We figured that with the amount of dollars that we were sending out, that that there would be an inclination to misuse those. But we also but we also figured that most companies do not knowingly want to do fraudulent things. So what we thought we would do at the very beginning is establish a rapport or a relationship with these companies, many of whom we had not really met before Hurricane Katrina. It's not as though we were dealing with the usual systems integrators that we're used to dealing with. We were dealing with a lot of construction companies and waste disposal companies that we were not really familiar with. But we found that was a good move, and we would always invite the Inspector General there also, which I think made the Inspector General aware that we were trying to do the right thing. It also probably sent a signal to the companies to try to be as honest as as they want to be.
I would add that that the economy is affecting everybody, and it's certainly also affecting the ability of any of these vendors to carry out the contracts that they've gotten and received from the states. And a financial responsibility assessment that was done 2 or 3 or 4 years ago may not be valid now in terms of that same contractor's financial viability, its ability to get loans and lines of credit to perform against firm fixed price contracts, which is the desired, contract type that the federal government's proposing here. So I think that renewing a look at that, ensuring that they do in fact have financial capability of lines of credit, and then as Greg pointed out, the ability to look to not just that contractor themselves, but their subcontractor, others that are down the line actually doing the work, that they're not cutting corners, and that there's good, effective reporting and review of their activities and oversight, either performed by the contracting office, by the program managers, or by the inspectors general, but that there is continuing oversight that they are aware of and that they know what's occurring, and that can help to keep people on the track that they need to be on to perform well.
How do you reconcile the different pressures, right? One is to reach out to DBEs and bring a lot of folks in to create jobs, and the other is to make sure you've got the financial wherewithal on a vendor's part to perform in a period where there's almost no credit for small companies to expand. So what is the state supposed to do to protect itself from contracts to people who can't complete them because they run out of credit?
Well, that's kind of an ongoing problem. We have, first in our evaluation process, we have cited in the code itself the various tests that we will do with a supplier, like their financial capabilities, their management experience, performance on previous contracts. If we run into an issue where they cannot complete the contract, if there are performance bonds that were required, we will take steps to activate those. Other than that, we would take steps to remove the contractor and locate a supplier to come in and take over and finish the project for us. And then we do have provisions as remedies under law that we can apply penalties toward the other supplier. Again, if they're out of money, that's not going to do much good, but we do have that capability.
Have you hired people to help you on the front end, a lot of people on the front end of the procurement process?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that.
Have you hired people on the front end? How much have you staffed up to look to do the due diligence on the front end of the process?
Well, right now we are at the current staffing level. We haven't been able to add additional staff, but as we move farther into this effort, of course, that will be evaluated and determinations made as if we can do that. One thing that we are in the process of negotiating right now is a contract with Dun & Bradstreet, and provide that type of detail to us during the evaluation. We want to make that contract available to all of our co-op members and higher education agencies as well, and obtain reduced rates that they can afford to go in and pull those DUNS reports and do that investigation before they award a contract.
Just a comment added on to that that doesn't necessarily have to do with the question, but there really is an effort in Ohio to use existing resources, even in the instance where we may be able to do some costing out for administrative function, because we are trying to maximize the amount of the ARA allocation that gets to those that most need that resource, rather than a significant portion of it being used up by state government. So we really are making a conscious effort to try to implement the ARA programming with the staff and resources that we already have available to us.
You do performance tracking or only financial tracking in your system? Like how many houses weatherized, or how many jobs created, or is it just a financial system?
I can't respond to that one. Could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you do performance tracking or just financial tracking? Do you count the number of houses weatherized or the number of jobs created, or is that somebody else's responsibility? How's the performance side of the ledger?
Yes, I'm sorry. This is Joe Secrest. We will be looking at all of those kinds of metrics relating to the spending of the ARA money here in Ohio. I mean, weatherization as an example, we will certainly look at the jobs created out of that spend, but we will also have metrics that will show how many houses it benefit, and maybe how many people living in those houses or families were direct recipients and beneficiaries of the spend. So again, Ohio is fortunate is that we have the IT infrastructure, and again the ability to add to the data elements that we will collect through that system. And those are some of the things that we will track and look at. I mean, we all, I think, in the end, want to know how the money was spent, not just in terms of job creation, but the beneficiaries of that spend also.
And if I could add here, Mayor, this is Neal Johnson with Pew. This is really where we think there truly is an opportunity to build on a state's existing information infrastructure, use this infusion of federal dollars and resource as an opportunity to really strengthen the state's capacity over the long haul to not only report on this spending and the outcomes that result from the spending, but also to use it to strengthen the state's longer-term infrastructure to both monitor and manage in-state spending as well. The folks in Ohio are among those states that have the benefit of, as Fred referenced already, a consolidated centralized information reporting system, as described by Joe, underpinning their practices. And so they're in a position to build there, but particularly among the states that don't necessarily have all those pieces in place, there is an opportunity here to build for the future.
This is Joe again. I think one of the things we're being told to expect in the future also is maybe future federal spending, even ARA, separate from the ARA process, will start requiring this kind of information. So maybe this is the shape of things to come for states.
Okay. Hey,
Can I add, this is Fred Thompson. I just wanted to add a comment because I think it's pertinent. You know, one of the things that states are being asked to measure here, which might not be a part of traditional contracts, is how many jobs are being created in their states, and that's actually a requirement from the federal legislation. Typically, if you have a firm fixed price contract, you know what it costs, you know it's done effectively, you measure the results of the work. You may not be measuring how many people are working on it or how many jobs are created, but that's another capability that I think states might add to their arsenal of information from the perspective that a lot of these requirements, and I think Ohio identified this by Ohio kind of program where you want to identify that you're creating jobs in your state, you're giving preference to local contractors. There's obviously an implicit goal of knowing how many jobs you're creating in your state. So to the extent that states use this capability to measure and manage that process, you know, this is an opportunity for them to in the long run, measure more effectively any sort of state preference or local preference in contracting that they have in their law.
Yeah, of course, just to be devil's advocate here, you could create twice as many jobs if you pay twice as much to have a house weatherized, right? So you have to be kind of careful what it is you're asking to buy. I was just trying to taunt you a little bit. You didn't even respond.
We threw the carrot out at least.
This is great.
I'm thinking how to respond to it.
Well, this is Joe again from Ohio. I will say in terms of our weatherization efforts, and they are expansive because of the new monies coming in from R for that purpose. But we do have an established weatherization program that's been going on for many years, and of course this is going to really pump up the number of homes and people that we're going to be able to directly benefit from it. But I think the very same monitoring processes that are in place now to ensure we're maximizing the dollars that we have at our disposal will be put in place to try to ensure that we're getting the most out of the dollar that we have available to us to spend.
So let's just stick with this for a second. Because I think we have these established weatherization players, generally community actions against poverty. Some have capacity, some don't, some can grow, some can't. And you've got training programs, not-for-profit and for-profit providers all trying to go into the business. How do you allocate time and money between the incumbents and the competitors? Do you put it through the incumbents, or are you just taking general bids? Talk to us a little bit about your weatherization process. I can make the question even more complicated. Let's assume the one's a disadvantaged business enterprise and the other is an established cap agency, right? So how do you go about setting up the procurement?
Okay, this is Steve from Ohio. I cannot address the weatherization because that's a program from a different division.
Okay.
But in general, we will look at the basic statement of work we get from the agency and what the need is. And then we'll work with them to come up with a final spec and make sure that it's not restrictive and it's open to anybody who might have interest in bidding on it. We'll make a determination up front if it's something that we're going to select for set-aside. And if it has potential, we will look toward the available bidder community and make sure that there's sufficient competition there. We'll make sure that they're qualified competition. They're just not companies who registered and can't do the job. And if we feel that there is sufficient competition, then we will set that aside. It's unfortunate on our EDGE program. This is a gold program, and it's not a true set-aside, so we can't go out and select that this particular project go to the EDGE group. But we will make it available to anybody who has interest, whether they be EDGE, whether they be minority or open market. And then during the evaluation process, then we will compare them with the requirements of the contract and their capabilities, and then award the contract accordingly.
Yeah. This is Joe from Ohio. Our weatherization program, this might sound strange in terms of who the administering agency is, but it is the development. And they, of course, will work first, I'm sure, with those that they have historically worked with in the home weatherization community. You're absolutely right. I think that we're getting like maybe a tenfold increase in the resource we have to do this work. And my understanding is, of course, again, we're talking about a workforce that does need trained up to do this stuff, but they are not high skilled employees that you need a lot of extensive training for. But they are making an effort to ensure that before they pass the money out for the weatherization, that those kind of folks and those kind of companies are in place and effectively handle the money and do the work that they're being asked to do.
This is Steve again. Something else, it kind of goes along with the front-end development of your bidding documents. We're going to be contacting our partners, both at NASPO and with NIGP, which is the National Institute of Governmental Procurement, which is more of your local government levels. And if they're using the stimulus dollars and putting their experiences up on the web, we'll be contacting them and looking at that and factoring that in as we develop the bidding document so that we don't make mistakes that are unknown at the time. We're going to look at what other states and other entities have done and see where things went well and didn't go so well, and hope that we create our documents that we won't have those issues. And we won't have 3 people doing the same job.
Okay. Couple more questions here. Let me just kind of continue to try to cause a little bit of trouble here. Greg, your explanation of Katrina and other serious and urgent purchasing issues you had was interesting. It does feel to me, though, like we're making this call too easy, that there is a definite inconsistency between speed and no risk, right? So you're setting up one of these systems, and of course the procurement department has a responsibility to follow the law, but just kind of like part of my questions on due diligence, did you make a conscious decision about, you're in a hurry to protect the country, there's so much you could do and so much you can't do? What general advice do you have about how to balance those?
Well, it's kind of situational. I mean, for example, with the stand-up of Homeland Security and the recency of 9/11, the terrorist attack on 9/11, we were under a lot of pressure to do things very, very quickly. And as a procurement official, you knew that if you did not do them quickly, you would not be in the job very long. But also being a wise procurement official, you knew that when you did them quickly, it would not be done very well and you would get beaten up later. And this kind of comes with the job. Same with Hurricane Katrina. You knew that it was not going to be responsible to basically say you weren't going to do something when lives and property were at risk. But you also knew that no matter what you did, it would be second-guessed later on. With this economic stimulus thing, the interesting thing is, I fear that many procurement officers there will not be that urgency, and they will basically, they're basically being told, spend the money, but do it exactly correctly, make sure that there's lots of transparency, create whole new processes, whole new reporting systems. Basically, it will really create paralysis unless there's absolutely a need. And so, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but if I were still working as a procurement official and the message is very, very strong that everybody cares about process, about everybody getting a fair shake in terms of the socioeconomic programs, I would just basically say, hey, okay, I'm going to salute. And things would not get done very, very quickly, and then I would have all the air cover in the world I needed. You do not have much air cover when there's a 9/11. You need to get things done. Katrina, you need to get things done. There's really no way to do them that will make the, for example, where we had negotiated nationwide contracts in the event of an emergency anywhere in the United States. We did not know at the time that it was going to happen in Louisiana and that we would be criticized for not having nationwide contracts with local companies in Louisiana. and that's what we got. That's one of the many things we got criticized for. So it's almost like it's a no-win situation. But you basically, I always kind of viewed it's a great country. Do your best, take your lumps, and move on. This environment is kind of interesting because there's spend, there's save, there's hurry up and do it slowly. I just don't think it's that hard if you're in the job because they create so many hoops for you to go through. You can salute, do nothing, and be a success, and that's unfortunate.
Well, this is Joe from Ohio. I think another protection, whenever you're trying to spend taxpayer money judiciously, you do have a certain responsibility to manage it effectively and make sure it's not wasted. And sometimes hoops are put into place to try to help reassure the taxpayer that you're doing due diligence and spending that valuable resource. And one of the additional things I think that ARA requires us to do is to do progressive reports on specific projects as the contractor is moving through. You have to give periodic updates on the progress of that particular project. So I think that again is going to make us pay more attention to the project. That's a nice picture of Steve Hunter. But anyway, and it's going to make us pay more attention to the progress and the quality of the project as it's being built because we are required to report on the progress of that project.
And okay, you can put Steve's picture back up now. I just like to kind of add on to what Greg was talking about during emergency response. We're responsible in Ohio to take care of those type of purchases when we have an emergency in our state. My counterparts across the country, their offices are involved with their respective states as well. And I think all of us have learned over the years, especially since Katrina, that there are times where you've got to do things quickly, but you don't sacrifice your process. And we're learning how to do that, and just in the chart that I had up there, still maintaining what the law requires us to do, still enabling our vendors ample time to prepare their quotes, get them into us. These are things that we've learned because of emergency response, and we'll be applying some of these processes to what we're going to do with the ARA funds as well. I mean, if it gets to a point where we've got to slow it down, then we'll have to slow it down. But we'll do everything we can to comply and make sure it's done in accordance with the Act.
So this is Fred Thompson. If I could just add, I think that when you look at how do you do things better and how do you do things faster, there has to be a sort of objective understanding that this is going to be the states are going to be stressed here. I mean, normally you can either change your process, which we've talked about some of the problems and challenges associated with that. You can increase the number of staff, and in fact, most states do not have the time to ramp up and train a number of staff, although there may be some opportunities to contract for support or to use audit support as part of your oversight capability. So there may be some opportunities there, or you can increase funding. And OMB is allowing states to add up to take a small portion of the stimulus funds to increase their funding on oversight. So there's some opportunities here, but clearly there is extra pressure to do a lot more in a reduced period of time, and states will be challenged in that role. So I would say that that we shouldn't kid ourselves, and we should recognize that there are increased risks. The ability to make those risks known to the public, to be able to communicate effectively, is a key part of how this can be managed.
Fred, let's in the last few minutes, maybe you and Neal could start on this, and Jim will give us concluding comments about where the procurement websites and all can be found. But let's assume that everybody on the phone now has procurement down perfectly. Let's talk a little bit about the other requirements. What do we know about the people infrastructure necessary for gathering information, doing the inspections, contract monitoring, reporting of the federally required information, all the non-accounting stuff? Either you, Neal, or Fred have comments about a state that, including Ohio, maybe setting this up, where those people are located, who do they report to, how does that work?
You have to do all that.
So we'll have thoughts on this as well. What I would say is that those states that are effectively managing their operations now are well positioned, but not necessarily totally secure in their ability to manage on what is required by the stimulus program. The ability to identify and oversee contracts, the ability to have resource information systems that provide them with information about not just what they've spent, but what they've gotten for what they've spent, put them in a good position. Now they are being asked to do other things, like look at the number of jobs created in their state, not necessarily a part of ongoing contract management. They're being asked to look at what state and other independent entities in their state are spending, again, not necessarily already within the structure. So they are being asked to do more. They are being given some more resources to do that now. I think that's a good thing. But I think that those that are already managed well, those that already measure these things well, are in a better position, but all states will certainly be stressed by this. I know Neal has another thought.
Yeah, thanks. Based on our 10 years of experience grading states on management, including the human resource component, the people that drive state organizations, I'd say we've got kind of a bell curve. And so, some of the states like Ohio are in a reasonably good position, maybe in the BB plus range, if we were to put a grade on it. But many states really are struggling, particularly in this current environment where the drop in state general fund dollars has really rocked what in some cases are challenged workforces in the first place. So your point is very well taken, Mayor Goldsmith. There is a real range of capacity to do this, and again, that's why we're kind of emphasizing in our work that we hope that particularly the states that don't necessarily have the systems or the people in place with the skill sets required, use this as an opportunity to continue to invest in the training and ensuring that the right people are in the right position to be able to both execute and oversee this work. And we'll be continuing to cover this in our research at Pew Center on the States, at the Government Performance Project, and also our colleagues at stateline.org, our news service within the Pew Center on the States that is linked to through the information here, are also are even as we speak covering this on a daily basis and trying to provide the best information for folks.
Will you be compiling? There's several questions about this issue. Oversight capacity, who's hiring, what type of people, what agencies are they in, what functions do they do? Will you be compiling any best practices that the folks on the call could, maybe they can be posted on the website for this conversation, or are you going to put them out in State Line? Anybody doing that?
It's a great question. We're putting up some of our best practice information within the next couple of weeks here from our 2008 Grading the States process on best practices in human resource management, that many of the components of which will key to the very immediate real-time work that states are needing to do in the context of the Recovery Act right now. So we're very hopeful to have that up within the next couple of weeks. And as I say, we're going to be continuing to use forums like this to get feedback from folks on what will be useful to them in moving forward. So we very much welcome the feedback. And as I say, the State Line folks are doing this work on almost daily basis.
Good. Jim, we got a lot of similar questions in the queue, but I think the best thing to do, and we're going to let Neal have the final word, but would you tell folks where your resource pages are, how they get access to the PowerPoints, if they want to email questions, just all that technical stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. We're at www.pewcenteronthestates.org, and folks can quick click through to the Government Performance Project site there, and we're very, very accessible through that, and our information is up on the slides that are going to be uploaded to the site here. We're continuing to upload best practice information across the areas, human resource, use of information in decision making, and how to apply performance-based budgeting and finance practices in the management of state agencies and managing state government as a uniform enterprise statewide, as the folks in Ohio are demonstrating. So there's a lot of stuff up there. We're getting more up over the next couple of weeks here, and we just appreciate the opportunity to partner with our colleagues, with Mayor Goldsmith and our colleagues at Kennedy School, our friends and colleagues in Ohio and other states that have been feeding us their best practice information, and we just look forward to the opportunity to continue this conversation.
Excellent. So, Jim?
Yes, hi, this is Jim Cooney again, and I thought I'd just take a minute to review where some other places you can find the resources that we've been referencing. In addition to the Pew Center site, I would like to remind you that this event was recorded, and we're going to be posting that recording along with everyone's PowerPoint presentations on the Government Innovators Network website. And that'll be in 2 to 3 business days, and you will be notified by email when it goes up. In addition, we do have a list of resources, and I'm sure you can find most or all of these on the Pew site too. But we do have a resources page on the Government Innovators Network. And you can go to the Government Innovators Network by, sorry, I've got the wrong page up there. Give me 1 second. But the web address for the Government Innovators Network is www.innovations.harvard.edu. And now I'm calling up the correct window. There we go. And you can get to the event page from in a couple different ways, but we'll go via the spotlights. This event page should look familiar to most of you, and then if you scroll down here, you see the resources link. And then we have the link to the Pew Center is stateline.org, recovery.gov, and the map that was discussed, Ohio's specific recovery page, and the NASBO and NASPO sites. So, any links we may be missing, we will be adding in within the next day or two.
All right. Well, with that, let me thank everybody, particularly Pew, for bringing us together, and Jim for the technology. And we appreciate the commitment to good government of the people who are on the phone, and look forward to staying in contact with you. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.